Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Faster Masters Rowing Radio, where having a rowing coach only makes you better. Following a program gives you a true pathway to becoming a confident rower who's respected by your peers. Become the athlete you want to row with. I'm Rebecca Caroe, and I'm joined by Marlene Royle.
Hi, Rebecca, and hello to our Faster Masters Rowing audience. And nice to be here.
It is very, very nice to be here. Finally, we're getting into springtime here in New Zealand, and we have rain, sunshine, rain.
We have a little bit of rain, and we're the opposite. So we're starting to move in, like the trees are starting to change color. So I have a first sign of reds and yellows today, but I like that. September is the best month to row up here. So
is that just because you have very settled weather?
Yeah, the weather's settled, and all the summer season kind of quiets down, so the water gets quiet, not quite so many people. The air is really nice in the morning, and it just we always seem to have really good water in September. So I like it.
I don't like rowing when it's really hot. Certainly, I think about 12 degrees centigrade air temperature is about right.
Well, this is the temperature for it was 9 here this morning, so but by the time the sun came up, 12, 13, and very nice with the sun, and bright sunny.
Yeah, so nice. Now, I'd firstly like to say a big thank you to everybody who supports this podcast with a donation. We rely on you, and we are incredibly grateful to the people who give regularly. If you enjoy what you hear today, please consider giving us a regular donation. You can find out more at fastermastersrowing.com/podcast. Now, this past week, Marlene, what have you been up to advocate for masters rowing more generally?
Well, I had a really nice talk with Ed Hewitt at Row 2K, and we were talking about the importance of masters rowing and how we have to keep educating for the masters population, and that's something that Row 2K really supports as well. So I think just in terms of professionals to professionals, keeping everybody on the same page to encourage our readership for all ages. So I think that was probably really good conversation this week. That was one thing.
Excellent. And I also had a very interesting week. We realized that there are other people out there who also like to support us on the journey of, starting the conversation about masters being an important part of the sport. And so if you're a member of our newsletter list, this week I'll be sending around a link to you with a program of articles about topics that should be of interest to masters and people who coach masters and clubs who have masters programs. And so on the newsletter, I'll send this round, and you can receive one article a month, which you can then publish anywhere you want. Put it in your club newsletter, put it on your Facebook group. Our only stipulation is that you credit us and link back to our website. So that will be coming out to everyone who's a newsletter subscriber. Hello to our live watchers. Always nice to have people live and with us this week. But it's now time to get on to a really important announcement. So we've been dropping little hints, haven't we, Marlene, into the social media thing that something exciting is coming up. Are you ready?
Yes, and it is.
Ta-da! We have a webinar planned coming up on rigging for masters. And this is just such an important topic. When Marlene and I sit down and we kind of plan our year and what are we going to do, one of the conversations we had was, what are the sorts of questions that people ask us? And, does that give us a clue as to topics? And Marlene basically said to me, so many people ask questions that show an underlying ignorance of rigging at its most basic level. And nothing wrong with asking the question. That's not what I'm pointing out. What I'm pointing out is that there are things that we need to learn in order to make our boats fit us individually. So Marlene, what's the context here for you?
Well, I definitely, we get a lot of questions about rigging. And, even when I teach new rowers how to scull, and you teach them the basic adjustments of the boat, they forget. It takes more than once to reiterate how you set this, how you set that, how do you make yourself comfortable. So, it is important to understand, first of all, on the basic level, how do you need to ensure that your boat is adjusted correctly so that you can have a good row, that you're comfortable. It's important to understand what, if you row a club boat, you may have limited adjustments, but there are adjustments that you can make to ensure that you can row properly. And when we're working on technique, if you are not set up or rigged correctly, you're really not going to be able to do what the coach is asking you to do. Because if you're too far from your oar handles, if your feet are not in the right place, if you're too high or too low, all of these types of things are going to affect what you're able to do. So if you're serious about learning good rowing or sculling technique, you have to understand what you need to do to get yourself set up the best way possible in the boat. So that's at a very basic level. And then there's learning about understanding, if you're really into the sport, you want to have an appreciation of, why does it matter what the distance is between my oar locks? Why does it matter how high or low my shoes are? Why does it matter where my seat tracks are? Why does it matter how my oars are adjusted? Why does it matter what blades I use? So these are all things that are essential to understanding the best way to move a boat, to do it the safest way without overuse injuries, to row to your particular strength, to, if you're a competitive athlete, you want to target a certain stroke rate. Well, if you're not adjusted correctly to match that stroke rate, you're not going to be able to row that stroke rate. So you have to know what affects your ability to row at a certain rate or a certain pace. And all of these things are manipulated with our rigging. And there's quite a lot to these adjustments. And then if you have your own boat, you want to learn how to customize it. Mm-hmm. That's the next level, because unlike elite athletes are all different shapes as well. But in general, they're very big people. They've got very long arms. They're very lean generally. They're very tall. When we have masters athletes are all different shapes and sizes. We might have the petite woman who's 115 pounds and learning how to row. We may have a man who's 6'4" and is just getting back into the sport after not doing anything for 30 years. Okay. He's going to have very different boat needs than the woman who's 115 pounds. Then we have all shapes and sizes in between. So I think the challenge with masters is much bigger to understand what's a priority adjustment. What do I need to do first? All of these kinds of questions are exactly the things we're going to dig into.
Let me show you the webpage. So it's at fastermastersrowing.com/rigging. And on the page, you will see that we have 3 guests who are going to join us on the webinar, in addition to Marlene and myself. First up, Mike Davenport, who's mainly known for his Max Rigging website. He was a professional rigger for the US national team. We then have Mike Purser, who runs a business only doing custom rigging for individuals in their single sculls. So rigging for individuals is his specialism. And thirdly, we have Volker Nolte, who is known for he's a biomechanist, and his high performance rowing books, and his most recent book, Rowing for Masters. And Volker is going to be talking about oars and rigging, and how the different oar designs that are available nowadays affect how long they should be and what your inboard should be. Mike Purser is going to talk about the rigging setup based on your stroke length, your power capacity, your flexibility, and your body weight, not off of a standard. And Mike Davenport is going to talk about the basics and how to make straightforward adjustments to your boat. Now, we've also got a little video here which Volker has recorded for us.
Hello everybody, I'm Rebecca Caroe and I'm from Faster Masters Rowing. In advance of our upcoming Rigging Masters webinar, I want to show the listeners some of the amazing insights that you will learn when you buy a ticket. Let me welcome Volker Nolte.
Hello Rebecca.
Now Volker, I want to ask you a question which is one that comes up very frequently in my coaching practice. How can you use rigging to get a longer stroke?
Well, you have several opportunities. The easiest way would be you shorten your inboard and move the foot stretcher to the stern. This gets you the feel of reaching out longer and you get a longer stroke. Something similar you see in para rowing where athletes are limited with their impairment, right? And the problem then is, of course, the next step is people then give you back feedback and say, well, this is now very, very, very heavy. They say, okay, shorten the oars. Well, and then you get to the problem that you cannot shorten the oars as much as you want because the oars are taken from the club or used from someone else, and you are stuck. So we need to talk about some opportunities to overcome such challenges to get the rowing for the masters rower more comfortable. And one way, of course, is then looking at the foot stretcher. You know, get the foot stretcher down, get the feet a little bit further apart, get the foot stretcher a little bit flatter, and you get more comfortable. You can even spread your legs a little bit for the people like me who have gained some weight over the last years, so you can get their belly between the legs. But then the problem is sometimes you cannot do it. Well, then you can move the seat up and so on. So you see there are a number of opportunities how to rig your boat.
So that's easy adjustments. Everybody knows how to move a foot stretcher, how to put a seat pad on top of their seat. Let's go into what we could do with more what I would call technical rigging, resolving for getting a longer stroke.
Well, I mean, once again, you can obviously do this a lot with the oar, with the length of the oar and the inboard relative to each other. And this brings the other problem in, which plate you need to use, right? Because depending on the plate, you need also different oar lengths. So it is possible to do this very, very sophisticated and very well if you are listening to the webinar and you get all the ideas that we will present.
And what Volker is saying is that he's going to be giving in his presentation a detailed rundown of the different oar designs from different manufacturers and the different shaft lengths and the different inboards that he recommends for masters rowers using modern equipment.
So there we go. A brilliant rundown from Volker Nolte about what he's going to be talking about in the rigging webinar. So if you own a single and you have not checked your rig this year, you should be coming to this webinar. If you have got older since the last time you checked your rig, which all of us have, you should be coming to this webinar because you change as you age. If you have improved your technique since the last time you checked your rig, you should be coming to this webinar because you change your rig depending on how skillful you are with handling the blades. And if you're coming back from an injury, you should also attend because you need to understand the things that you can do with your boat that will help aid you on your path to recovery. So the URL is fastermastersrowing.com/rigging. And the event is on October the 6th. So that's a Wednesday. It is 7 p.m. London time. It is 2 p.m. New York, so Eastern Daily Time. and it is 11 a.m. San Francisco Pacific Standard Time. It's going to be 7 a.m. in New Zealand, and sorry, Australia, it's going to be 5 a.m. for you. But hey, you're in lockdown, so you'll be fine. You won't be doing anything.
Right. You can get up anyway.
You can get up. That's so mean of us. But more importantly, the whole thing's going to be recorded. So if you buy a ticket, you will get everything anyway. Part of the webinar is also a whole series of charts, articles, and documents supplied by us and the expert speakers with the exact range of rigs for all sorts of different heights, weights, strengths, just as we were talking about there. So even if you don't attend and don't watch the webinar, you'll get amazing value just from getting those charts.
I'm really excited about this. I personally love rigging. And it's so important when you're working with lots of different people who have lots of different levels of mobility and skill level. If you can make them comfortable, they're going to row a lot better. They're going to learn a lot better. They're not going to fight with the boat. They're going to be able to work with the boat and learn how to move the boat. And, if your rigging is off, it's pretty uncomfortable if your blade's going in the water at the wrong angle and it's going deep, or you're catching crabs, or your inboard is like this instead of like this, So, I mean, all of these things distract from good rowing if you're not set up. And I really appreciate our three guests that they take a deep dive into this stuff. So it's really cool.
Yeah, so it's fastermastersrowing.com/rigging. You'll find all the details there and the link to buy yourself a ticket. And a reminder that as with most of our Faster Masters products that are one-offs, you have a lifetime access to this. So you buy this, you can come back to it at any time. And that goes for our previous webinars, the racing starts, the functional movement assessment. So there's quite a lot of product there that you might find of interest as a general resource if you're coaching masters, or if you're a masters rower, or if you're a club that has a masters group. Now, I want to move on and show you the amazing photograph that Bill Caroe sent me. Look at that. This is Italy. It's the Uffizi Gallery, which is the big art museum in Florence. And as you can see, it's on the River Arno, and there's a little pontoon and a rowing boat right in front of the front entrance, which of course most people don't notice because the road is high up and in front of the gallery. But there's a tiny little line of flags that maybe you can see along the foreshore, and a little dark bit behind it, that's a tunnel, and that tunnel goes into the boat shed. Isn't that amazing?
Very cool. One of my favorite spots, by the way.
Oh, right. And have you been rowing in Italy, in Florence? Have you ever rowed there?
You know what? I've actually never rowed out of this club, but I have rowed on the Arno downstream farther in Limite, which is right next to Da Vinci, where Leonardo da Vinci is from. So Limite, Limite is one of the older rowing clubs in Italy, and that is where Solani boats are. So Solani is another boat manufactured, and I spent a weekend there trialing some Solani boats one weekend. So
they're pink, aren't they? Often the Solani boats.
Well, they're actually like a light blue. They're a light blue, but I'm
mistaken them. It's the French boat builder that's yeah. Now we have a big topic this week, which is imposter syndrome. There was a very long and involved discussion on the Masters Rowing International Facebook group, which started with this: is anyone familiar with imposter syndrome in middle-aged athletes and how to get past it? I mean, not me, obviously, just asking generally for a friend, which obviously got a lot of very funny responses. But this is really serious. And actually, there are very clearly a lot of people who come to the sport not having rowed as children or youth athletes. What is imposter syndrome, Marlene?
Well, I'll read the definition, and that way we'll be staying on target. So it said here, imposter syndrome. This is from Wikipedia, by the way. Imposter syndrome, also known as imposter phenomena, imposterism, fraud syndrome, or the imposter experience. I like that one. Is a psychological pattern in which an individual doubts their skills, talents, or accomplishments and has a persistent internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. Despite external evidence of their competence, those experiencing this phenomenon remain convinced that they are frauds and that they do not deserve all that they have achieved. Individuals with imposterism incorrectly attribute their success to luck or interpret it as a result of deceiving others into thinking they are more intelligent than they perceive themselves to be. So I thought this was quite interesting.
It is, but equally, I definitely know that from my coaching practice, my perception of, say, an athlete's skill level is frequently much higher and more advanced than the athlete. And one example springs to mind of a charming young woman who I insisted was ready to do her very first 2K novice race. This is when I was coaching people who were young masters. And she reluctantly allowed me to enter her into the race. And it was at Nottingham in the UK. And Rebecca, if you're listening, you know it's you. She went off the start with, another 5 athletes, and she got to halfway, at which point she was 4 lengths clear water ahead of everybody else. And she then obviously won the race, but she told me afterwards that she said, after she had kind of realized that she was in front and was obviously making a decent fist of her very first novice race, she said, in my head, every stroke I was going, don't mess it up, don't mess it up, don't mess it up, all the way to the finish. And it wasn't until after she'd done that she began to gain confidence in that her skill was real and reproducible. I think, sometimes people think it's a flash in the pan. Oh, I just got lucky. I could balance the boat and do the drill that you asked. But actually, there are clearly more than one person out there feels that their perception of reality is a massive underperformance compared with what their coach thinks. So how do we overcome this?
Well, I think I would say, first of all, from the point of view of if you are coming to practice on a regular basis and you're getting in the boat and you're learning new skills and you're training, you are taking steps forward you are doing something authentic, right? You are doing something measurable. And I think putting things into objective terms is important. For example, last month I rode X number of kilometers. This month I rode 5% more. I rode this many kilometers, or I rode my home course in this time last month. This month I did it 10 seconds faster. So I think if you're doubting your skill or your accomplishments, you need to gather some objective advice or objective information to chart your improvement. Otherwise, you don't know. What you think may or may not be accurate. Get outside feedback, like in a video review, for example. If you do a video review and the coach who's doing your video review is saying, well, look how much better the rhythm is. Look how much better your releases. Look how much better you're keeping your blades off the water. And if they don't believe you, go back to their video 6 months ago and compare. Well, this is where you were 6 months ago, and this is where you are now. And look at the side-by-side difference, so that you can see, all of this effort you've been putting into improving is showing. Because of course, when we're in the process of it, we don't always see we don't always see the small steps that we're making forward all the time. When it's in your own head and you're doing it on a day-to-day basis, you need a little bit of outside perspective, I think.
You do. There was a very good program on TV ages ago where they worked on a whole load of people who were clinically obese. And one of the things they had them do was to run a reasonably short circuit of about 300 or 400 meters. And after they'd been on the program several weeks, they got them to do the run wearing a little waistcoat, which they had added to it the weight that they had lost, so that they were running at their start weight, not their current weight. And it really showed to them how much progress they had made.
Well, think about a 10-pound bag of potatoes. You know, I mean, go carry that in your backpack if you've lost 10 pounds. But you know, I think it's there. There is definitely, I think sometimes in rowing, and probably in other sports, but since I know rowing best of all, you know, sometimes people think, well, you know, I'm not the classical oarsman or oarswoman. That person is. But then again, then you have this person like who's out there every day, who's learning every day. And I think there is an element of building up confidence. And we were talking about the book. This is an old classic mental training book, The Toughness Training for Sports by James Loehr. He's a sports psychologist. And one of his most important premises is no matter what you want, you've got to have the physical preparation to do it. So you are a performer when you're competing. So right away, we could say, okay, is this imposter syndrome where I am a fraud? Not if you put it in context of you may not be who you are on the street, but when you step into the boat, you become the performer. You become that person. And in order to continue to move ahead, depending on what your dreams are in the sport and depending on what you want to get out of it, you have to have the physical preparation and training to match the desires that you want. You can want to row sub 8 minutes for a 2K, but if you don't have the physical preparation to do that, you're not going to do that no matter how much you want to do that. And I'll tell you a funny story. When my very first coaching job, when I coached at the Boston University summer program, which was one of the first master's programs in the United States, and it was in Boston in the early 80s. I had this guy in my class, an adult, and I called him Robert. From day one, I thought he was Robert. He rowed for me for 8 weeks all summer, and every day I called him Robert. Every practice, he was Robert. At the end of the year barbecue, he said, you know, I just have to tell you, my name's not really Robert. You know, my name is, you know, David. He said, but I loved being Robert. He said, when I came to rowing, I was Robert. This is my performer rowing self. I'm Robert. And when I got into the boat, I was Robert and I enjoyed being Robert. So it kind of a little bit fits in with this. It's not that he's being an imposter in this sense, but he liked to take on the different identity of his performer self as a rower, which was different than his civilian life, if we call it that, right? So I just thought that was kind of interesting.
It's really interesting. And nothing wrong with that. I mean, in marketing, we talk about personas all the time.
Yes.
And there is definitely a different aspect to you and yourself that you present in different situations. The rowing club is a different place from being a parent at home, from being the person who goes to work, whatever it is that you do. So perhaps that's a helpful thing, is to think about, what does this person who has done this physical preparation, who turns up for this number of training sessions a week, who is diligent and consistent, you can call them something different, but what would I think of someone if I said, look at this list of things that this person has done, you know, what would I think of them on paper? And you go, oh, you know, and that's try and separate your perceptions inside your head from, and then view the facts objectively. That might be a helpful thing to think about.
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, keep in mind that certainly with rowing, which on one hand, we can say the technique is pretty simple. Okay. On one level, it's simple. On another level, it's very complex. And it depends how far you want to dig into it and where you want to go with it. But not everybody is, quote, the natural athlete. Okay. Certainly not me. I mean, I was nowhere near a natural athlete whatsoever. I had to very much learn how to scull. I had to learn how to row. I wasn't one of these people who, like, I've seen people I give a lesson to and like they can row really pretty well after the first lesson. I was never like that. So yeah, I had to learn. And there are people who simply learn in a different way or take longer to learn.
Yeah.
And those are those people we look at, like, who's the most improved? Who shows up for practice every day, right? If you're one of those people who's showing up for practice every day, you are not an imposter. But maybe you need to bridge the gap between what you're actually doing objectively and where your confidence level is. So, I think you have to balance these factors.
I think that if you can focus on enjoying the process of rowing, that can help you get positive feedback and enjoyment. So pay attention to what you're actually doing. You're working on your technique, you're working on your fitness. What are the changes you're being asked to make? Can you do them? Can you do them for one stroke? Can you do them for two strokes? Can you do them for three strokes? And you acquire the mentality of an objective observer who's like a scientist in a white lab coat, who is making numerical observations that you can't argue with the numbers. The numbers are what they are, rather than trying to put a subjective perception over the top of it. And I think that maybe will help you, A, to get pleasure from your rowing, but B, to separate your personal perceptions from what's going on day to day when you're actually coming to rowing. Because if you're not enjoying it, don't do it. But if you're enjoying it, let's see what we can do to make your enjoyment deeper and more long lasting, so that you can maybe set aside feelings of inadequacy and just be enjoying the moment of what you're doing and your pleasure of acquiring the technique and the fitness that you desire.
Well, and it is all about what you want to get out of it. And that's completely goes into racing, because I used to tell people, you know what, most people really don't care. It's really about you and what you're the pressure that you put up upon yourself. Most people outside in your family or your friends are probably going to say, oh my gosh, this is fantastic what you're doing. This is so cool. And what satisfaction you get from your training and from your racing is it's you versus you, and you only have control over what you do. So you don't know, that person who's rowing next to you might be feeling the exact same way that you are. How do you know? You have no idea. So
Correct.
You do have to really decide what you're doing for yourself and enjoy it. And that's about it, really. I think it's very personal.
I teach a learn to row class, and one of the things that invariably somebody will say when they've come to their sort of fourth-ish lesson is they'll say something like, I do love it that you call us athletes. And I was like, well, what are you?
Right.
You're here because you're doing physical training, and I'm teaching you something that, yeah, it's new, but you're the athletes. And I think that helps them maybe get into the Robert mindset.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. That's your persona, right? When you come to the boathouse, it's not the same as going to the gym. A boathouse has a certain aura about it. You come in and there's all these beautiful boats, and it's a special zone. And I think you get into this special mentality when you step into the boathouse. There's always, every boathouse has a mood, has an atmosphere, and you pick that up when you come into the boathouse. Hopefully it's a good energetic atmosphere, right? So
I always think most boathouses have a couple of really fun things in there, one of which is usually a trophy, which is a road sign or a flag that someone has helped themselves to from a regatta.
Yes, little bits and pieces of stolen goods. Right?
Memorabilia. Thank you, everybody, for being with us along the ride for this episode of Faster Masters Rowing Radio. It's been great having you. Thanks for the observations from our live listeners. And if you are out in the boathouse and you suspect someone might be suffering from imposter syndrome, pay them a compliment and tell them why you know that that compliment is true. You're not just being nice to them, that you have seen objective progress or a change. I think that we can all be kinder to some of the people that we row with, particularly if we ourselves are confident in our own rowing. Even if you suffer from imposter syndrome, why don't you try paying a compliment and giving some positive feedback to someone else who's in your crew or in your group? And they don't have to be worse or better than you, just anyone. I think that is very, very helpful. Until next time, this has been Faster Masters Rowing Radio, the show dedicated to masters athletes who want fun, fitness, and confidence in their rowing. You can become a student of the sport by buying a Faster Masters program subscription today at fastermasters.com/join. Till next time, bye-bye.